Yeah, we started off. So one of the things to do when we do these events is a little bit of sense making, and I sit behind the scenes and I take notes. I pull out all the important pieces that everybody's talking about, and kind of make sense of everything so that we have some takeaways from the day. And I think this is really valuable. It's valuable for me because it's like a fire hose of information that happens throughout the day, and everybody's talking about certain things. So let's get started. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what happened today. And of course, this will all be shared a little bit later. And yeah, so this morning we started off with Amy Peck, and Sophia and Amy talked about parsing the metaverse hype. So a little bit about where your customers are. That was something that actually was repeated over and over again, is take measurement of where your customers are. Like just, it's creating that baseline of where the customers are, what they're doing right now, and what path they want to take and where they want to be. So, having the transparency between clients and brands is really important. Finding the best use of retail with the location and digital. Everyone's an influencer model. Like that's something that AR is the gateway. That's something that Amy said. And there's definitely precautions happening to protect brand identity and humanizing the relationship. Word of mouth is the best strategy. It's really the evolution of the internet, and Web3 is the internet. Metaverse is the website. I thought that was really interesting what Amy said, to try and define how the metaverse and Web3 are coming together. And she literally said that Web3 is the internet and metaverse is the website. Focus on human experience. That was kind of a repeat over and over again. Being real is a huge thing right now with regards to brands and dealing with their consumers. And of course, how brands bring value to consumers. And we heard that over and over again. So next we moved on to listening to Elijah Tai, and he spoke about ad monetization in the spaces. And it was everything from portals can be rented by brands. He spoke about SDK implementation and trying to connect all the different pieces and parts together. He had a great visual presentation for us and deck to explain some of these things. So he also said WebXR is coming quick. It's still early for big brands, and he was actually working a lot more with younger companies. But ways to make money were through portals, banners, banner advertisements, and tokens. And that definitely relates back to generating revenue through the blockchain. So next we had a great panel about product placement and native advertising with Andy Fidel, Evan Gappelberg, and Ashley Crowder. That was a really good one too. It came all the way back to 3D design. And I'm going to do a little bit of a summary of the repeats throughout the day. 3D design and what 3D file formats, what was happening there. What's the end use case? Ground zero is getting your 3D models into play. And again, that was over and over again. And I know Evan, he was using AI to create 3D models at scale. So there was a couple of things there, because creating content is where we're at with the bottleneck. So finding these tools to, create these things, that's what's important. And then go where your customers are today. Again, repeating, find out where your customers are and doing that research. So let me move on. So then we had Capturing the Spatial Imagination with Tom Fisk, Terry Proto, Samantha Wolf, and Kira Bensing. And they talked about how to harness imaginations. Brands need to be willing to be uncomfortable. And this is actually something I heard a couple of times, but I know they said this in the panel. This is something that brands aren't used to, right? They need to have control of their entire brand, but Kira said it, there's a beauty in the fear of the unknown. And that's what we're living right now when it comes to innovation and how things play out. So knowing where you want to go, giving yourself that end goal or the KPIs that are attached to these experiences, who your deployment audience is, learning that not everything's going to be perfect. Fail fast, fail cheap was what Terry Proto said. I've got that in the lessons. I thought that was really good. And again, remember who you're creating for. And also a little bit about mature companies are ready to be more innovative, but I also see some, the smaller companies being more agile to be more creative as well. So then we went on to Karen Alexander, Vinitha Swarmatharan, and Gary Fernald's discussion about engagement metrics. And they talked about the maturity of brands and everything from to empathy engagement to experimental. They talked about IAB, the Internet Advertising Bureau, and the MRC. Thanks for the acronyms, Marketing Research Council. But all of these, all of them lead to ethical design and the privacy discussions that need to be had. So, they talked a little bit about avatars and how protecting avatar identity and regulation awareness. And be ready and willing to operate. They talked about functional AR like IKEA, being able to place things in the space, as well as experimental experiences that just give brands that connection to the consumer, where the consumer sees that utility as being very useful. And that's talked about several times through the day. ROE, return on engagement, that's kind of like the ROX, return on experience. And then there was a call for organizations to work more with academic institutions and brands to work with academic institutions to initiate some of those partnerships that are out there. So endless opportunities to capture data in spatial mediums. We've only just begun. I think the summary in, the summary in that one was just, what are the positive ways to engage customers with these immersive experiences? And brands have a real opportunity with that. We then had the next panel with DJ Smith, Daria Fedko, Rupert Deans, and Mike Cadeau, and they talked about using XR to sell in real life, IRL. And they talked about the progress of browsers, how wearables will take it to the next level. And haptics are really going to be the key to making things feel more real, but still quite a ways away. Using AR on the phone for your ROI. They talked a lot about AR, try before you buy, place in your space. There's a huge selfie culture now that brands should take advantage of, whether it be face filters or clothing filters, that sort of thing. Snapchat's amazing way to reach customers, especially the next generation. Interaction with objects increases engagement, and gamification, which is a huge piece. We didn't get too much into that today, but it was definitely touched on in a couple of the presentations. Who is the experience for? Again, who is your end customer? Where are your customers at right now, and what are you creating? Interesting that creating a funnel, a production funnel, a user journey funnel of stages of what they have to do at certain times, that kind of lends itself back to the gamification process. And that can be done with interactions of the 3D models in the experience. And, what happens at each stage, experience as much as you can, get involved in the community and join meetups. So that was that session, and rolling right along. Here we go. Let's see who is next. We had the future of virtual commerce with Sophia Moshasha, Tony Parisi, Will Connect, and Jake Steinerman. And they talked about digital twins, using GIFs, creating engaging cultural experiences. Cultural was also mentioned a couple of times through this presentation, and really interesting to hear how the personalization will certainly draw in that cultural piece, but it was mentioned over and over again, and it just lends itself to the accessibility of mass consumer adoption and being able to bring every person, based on culture, into these experiences so they can have access to. So they talked a little bit about how NFTs were the next generation of baseball cards, and I thought that was really interesting, just on the collection purpose of it. And the value of digital assets, what is identified with that value, having seamless pathways through that virtual commerce experience, the accessibility. It doesn't have to be in a headset. And I think there was somebody throughout the day said there needs to be a flag that flies that full. I thought that was funny because it's something we've been saying a long time, but because the premise of building experiences is not a cheap endeavor, it's actually quite an expensive one, that lesson actually is something brands should take to, that it does not have to be a VR experience right away. And there's a lot of things to build before you get to that stage. It doesn't need to be expensive. It can start small. We can grow and to be an affordable experience that you can try and build out that proof of experience. I call POX or POX, proof of experience. Next, we had Sophia and Richard Ward talking about engaging your customers, and Richard represented Ready Player Golf, and just sharing a little bit of Richard's reactions per minute, and that was kind of interesting. Him explaining a little bit more about the gamification around Ready Player Golf, how it's a social experience, how you're doing something in a world, and this is something that's has a purpose and it has a social factor of it. So it's become very, very successful, which is really interesting. Next, we had empowering brands in mixed worlds, and this was with Bobby Carlton, Val Vicante, Briar Prestige, and Marco Carvalho. And, they talked about how interconnecting the physical world and the digital world, the term phygital, has different, a huge undertaking for brands to try and figure out their worlds between the two spaces, the brick and mortar and the test and that piece, as well as selling digital goods inside their world that match the physical. They talked about expressing themselves with culture, gamification, also using history to become educated. And something I thought one of them mentioned was about brands collaborating with other brands to come together, and what that looks like, partnering up and finding that collaboration partner. Playing to win. The key is community, bringing people together, and that's the social aspect. And again, that was kind of repeated over and over again. Don't get caught on the buzzwords, consumer testing and rapid reporting. That's the, do your research and really testing things out faster paced. Experiment in your space. And again, you do not need VR to start everything. So deciding on your level of immersion, that's kind of your opening line and getting started. So next we had setting a high bar for avatars, and we had Dulce Berga, Veronica Carvalho, Armani Alcahat, and Andy Stack. And in this presentation, they talked about voice user interfacing and instructional design. Again, what does your user want? Start with your baseline. Who's your audience? Who is your customer? They talked a little bit about chatbots and creating, again, what is that chatbot doing in a space, and who are the users in the space? So what is the type of chatbot that you're creating? People are looking for realism. They're looking to interact more on an emotional level with avatar identities. And, it really does come down to that mental agency that people have when they're in these spaces, that we need to consider what those interactions and as well as ramifications are of building up that identity process. So then we went on to my partner, Alan Smithson. talking about the Metaverse Mall and something that we've created on the Metaverse Engine. This is my company, and yeah, we've got this mall that Alan took you through. I explained a little bit about avatar creation and the multiplayer effect. You know, running things on the browser, just like all the other conversations, you know, that's opening up the access and breaking down these barriers is what everybody wants. And this is something that we've created. We're launching at the end of the year, and you know, discussing all the options about payment rail options, about fiat currency, cryptocurrency, having proximity activations and things like that, but breaking down those barriers so it's easily accessible and deploying on the web, deploying on a web browser. The web browser also, you know, having SEO compatibility with the HTML HUDs to pick up the marketing match for brands as well. Next, we had the road to mass consumer adoption with Sophia and Bob Bjork from Meta, and talking about adaptability and people wanting to create. This was a great conversation because he really dug into the creators that are out there and looking for places to connect, places to create and engage those opportunities with personalization. So creating places for engagement, for transaction, making things meaningful for the user. And how does an experience become the driver of action? And I thought that was really unique. I actually noted that in my lessons at the top. We'll come back to that in a minute. Zero in on one thing to create so that it doesn't overwhelm the user. I think that's really important right now as we're taking this fire hose of information and imagine giving it to the consumer, not just with the onboarding process and then that interactivity level, not to overwhelm them with the entire process in itself. The value of people and contributing to design so that they can personalize it. So that was that one. I've got a few more here. Whew, it's been a good day. Yeah, fire hose of learning is a good thing. So what happens in the headset stays in the headset. And we had Kent Bai, Ora Freeman, Katitsia Rodriguez Pereda, and Avi Barzev. And they just talked about policies. You know, as soon as you start dealing with headsets, you're dealing with a lot more tracking, privacy concerns, avatar creation, and privacy by design as you start to collect the data and that sort of thing needs to be considered. So the company needs to protect the consumer and themselves when they start to engage with consumers on this more immersive level. So learning about, you know, the different terms of service when these users are in there. So that was a great conversation. Facilitating branded events. This was a fun conversation with Daniel Dabrowski Bryant, Athena Demos, Anne-Marie Enz, and Sonia Haskins. And all of them event planners, some of them moving from live to virtual, to doing the hybrid versions now and trying to figure out where brands want to have a presence in the immersive space. So, you know, brands are looking for compelling and engaging places to create communities, and also to bring some of them bringing their employees into events and giving them that space to collaborate. I thought it would, I'll note Daniel came up with the term FOMO, the failed on metaverse opportunity. I thought that was kind of interesting. We're all about creating new acronyms around here. And, you know, interoperability needs to happen before the metaverse happens. So right now, Athena called it, we're in the multiverse right now. We are not in the metaverse. We're far way off from that because we don't have interoperability. So, so think about the fact that we need to go into the multiverse first before we start to connect all the dots and become part of a metaverse, which is a bigger picture. Then we started talking to Celeste and Gabe Baker, Christy Fennison, and Doug Jacobson about building branded digital twin experiences. And first of all, I wanted to share the word skeuomorphism. It's one that I learned a while back, but I know it's new for many people. Basically, it's the design concept of making items represented and resembling themselves in the real world. So hence the word digital twin. So skeuomorphism, if you hear that again, then you know what that means. And basically, brands need to figure out how to build these digital spaces that also have sustainability, efficiencies in them, everything from smart city development to product deployment, even testing out products in certain ways before actually going into production. So sustainability was a huge factor. There's a huge cultural significance sometimes when you're building out digital experiences and repurposing them. It's interesting that in this conversation, they also talked about how some brands are looking to have replicas of their brands made or their offices, and you don't need to have that. And this is where they had a lot of fun in this conversation talking about a Pop-Tart world and how it could be just anything. You could actually pop out of a toaster in an immersive experience, and that's fun, and that's something that you can't do in the real world. So creating these unique and different experiences for brands and how they enter into the space is really unique. So then we moved on to Linda Ricci and Han Kim, Cynthia Mahler, and Greg Catano. They talked about the brand experience IP landscape. This was really interesting. They talked brand dilution and the things that can start to happen inside of immersive spaces and brands opening up their walled gardens to consumers to come into these immersive experiences. We talked a little bit about how digital shoplifting is going to happen, whether we like it or not. So brands need to open up themselves to these smaller failures to try and build those walls stronger around them. So doing everything to kind of move the needle, and brands need to be aware of what the cost is of failure and what success looks like for them, and that sometimes things go wrong when you're innovating and they're not quite right, so they need to be opened up to that, and understanding what's sold inside and outside the platform. That was one thing. And another interesting piece was about understanding where the user journey starts and which vendor they're working with at the beginning and who they end up with. And this relates back to, if something goes wrong, where does that consumer go to? Who does that consumer go to? And this is important for brands to understand the user journey and the payment rail process, or maybe it's another company representing them, wholesaler or something like that. Then we had Unlocking Immersive Brand Activations, which just finished a couple of minutes ago. That was with Sophia and Brian Hutchinson, Winslow Porter, and Amanda Poole. They talked about the accessibility factor and being able to have web-based activations where the consumers don't have to open an app. They don't have to go into and open things or download things. So this is breaking the barrier right away to a seamless experience that can happen directly on their mobile devices. Using additional storytelling or inspirational use cases, long-term strategies, having something new, and bringing an element of social to the experiences with multiplayer is key, because how fun is it to shop in a brand experience with somebody else? And finding the utility of these experiences is key. And it's where people will change their perspective about this technology when they find the utility of the technology. So, and then just aligning the client's expectations on everything. So that's my wrap up of sense making. And I'll just scoot right up to here. These were kind of my key takeaways from the day. Some of them are repeats that we talked about. So I'm going to try and go through them really quickly. So tech needs to have value, and people want the multiplayer experience. They want the social experience. Monetization helps creators with what consumers want, and engagement will increase with interaction. Ground zero is 3D models. Assets can work with multiple departments. That was a huge one. Just remember that if you're making a 3D asset for the marketing department, the education training department can also use that, and other departments can use it. Know where you want to go. And again, this is like that baseline of where you start from and what is your end goal, who is your audience, and what journey do you want to take to get there. And yeah, using this technology in positive ways to engage with customers. There's endless opportunities to capture data in spatial mediums. Gamification of experiences is how users and consumers will return back to your brand to do that experience again, or maybe it is to collect more rewards. But the gamification component is a huge piece. And I think just to plug the production summit on October 13th, I know that gamification will be a huge piece that we'll talk about is how do we build these experiences that we're talking about today. Fail fast, fail cheap. Talked about that again. What's old is new again. And I think this is really cool because we talked about, experiences and how unique they are. And sometimes it's going back into history to repurpose some of the old assets or parts of older buildings and things like that can be repurposed into these immersive experiences that make them really cool, that tells a story about the brand. And experiences that become a powerful driver of action. That was another thing that I kind of picked up on. The skeuomorphism, and brands need to really strategically plan for what their purpose is of activating technology and not just doing it for the sake of it. So that's my report on sense making. I think we'll probably bring in Sophia now because I know we're about to release. Here, let me stop sharing my screen.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good, Julie. That was awesome. I mean, you could have literally given this whole day's presentations.
I wouldn't want to do that, that's for sure, but thanks for that. We've got such an extensive amount of knowledge within our community, and I hope that I was able to provide a little bit of some takeaways for everybody. I know I needed them, but I think it's always good to take that reflection and kind of 11 o'clock this morning when we first started was a long time ago, so it's kind of good to circle back and see what happened throughout the day. So
yeah. No, I can't wait till those takeaways are released into the ether so we can all kind of benefit off of what everybody else is saying and collaborate based on what people have been done, learn from people's best practices, and takeaways, all those things. So we don't want to repeat the same mistakes. And we just want to keep building from what other people have been doing and what works for them. So it's definitely important discussions to have.
That's right,
Julie.